The auctioneer's gavel never fell. It didn't have to. Clara Jane Whitmore stood on that saloon stage in Copper Gulch, Arizona, summer of 1882, and listened to her own father sell her like livestock. "She's blind as a bat," Walter Whitmore slurred, shoving her forward. "Can't see her hand in front of her face. But she cooks. She cleans. She don't cause trouble." 37 men watched in silence. Only one stepped forward. A scarred stranger with eyes that saw nothing in color but everything that mattered. He knew her secret, and that terrified her more than being sold. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to our channel and follow Clara's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far her story travels. Now, let me tell you how it all began. The summer heat in Copper Gulch hit like a fist. Clara Jane Whitmore felt the sweat sliding down her spine as she stood in the corner of the Red Dust Saloon, her dark spectacles hiding eyes that saw everything. 5 years of pretending. 5 years of bumping into walls she could clearly avoid. 5 years of letting people guide her by the elbow when she could have walked straighter than any of them. She heard her father's boots scraping across the wooden floor before she smelled the whiskey on his breath. "Clara, get over here." She didn't move fast enough. Walter Whitmore's hand closed around her upper arm, fingers digging into flesh. He yanked her forward, and she stumbled, not because she couldn't see the chair in her path, but because she'd learned that stumbling made people pity her instead of suspect her. "Pa, what are you doing?" "Shut your mouth." His voice was thick, slurred. 3 days without sleep. 4 bottles of rot-gut whiskey. And now, whatever scheme had crawled into his desperate mind. The saloon had gone quiet. Clara could feel the weight of eyes on her, the bartender pausing mid-pour, the card players lowering their hands, the working girls on the staircase leaning over the railing to watch. In a town like Copper Gulch, entertainment was scarce. A drunk man dragging his blind daughter across a saloon floor? That was better than any traveling show. "I need to talk to Dutch," Walter announced to no one in particular. "Dutch, you still running that card game?" A chair scraped. Heavy footsteps approached. "Whitmore." The voice belonged to Dutch Brennan, owner of the saloon and the closest thing Copper Gulch had to a crime lord. "You owe me money. Considerable money. This ain't a social call, is it?" "I can pay." "With what? You already sold your horse, your wagon. That sad excuse for a ranch." Dutch laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "What's left? The shirt off your back?" Clara's stomach dropped. She knew that tone in her father's voice, the desperate, cornered animal tone that meant he was about to do something unforgivable. "I got something better than a shirt." Walter shoved Clara forward. She collided with the table edge, gasping at the sharp pain in her hip. "I got her." The murmur that rippled through the saloon was like wind through dead grass. "Your daughter?" Dutch sounded amused. "What am I supposed to do with a blind girl, Whitmore? I run a saloon, not a charity house." "She ain't useless." Walter's grip tightened on her arm. "She cooks better than any woman in this territory. Cleans, too. Does laundry, mending, whatever you need. And she's quiet. God knows she's quiet. Never complains, never argues, just does what she's told." Clara kept her face blank, her eyes unfocused behind the dark glasses. Inside, something was breaking. A small, foolish part of her that had still believed her father might love her, might choose her over the bottle, might, just once, protect her instead of using her. That part of her died, standing in that saloon. Blind, though. Dutch circled her like a buyer inspecting cattle. "Can't see nothing at all?" "Not a damn thing," Walter said eagerly. "Been that way since she was 18. Some kind of fever took her sight. But her other senses? Sharp as a tack. She can hear a mouse sneeze from across the house." Cooks by smell and touch better than women who got both eyes. Dutch reached out and lifted Clara's chin with one thick finger. She let him, keeping her gaze fixed on nothing. Don't react. Don't flinch. Don't let him see. Pretty enough, Dutch admitted. If a man don't mind the dead eyes. I mind. The voice came from the back of the room. It was low, rough, like gravel scraping against stone. Every head turned toward the shadows near the rear door. Clara turned too, out of instinct, then caught herself. A blind woman wouldn't turn toward a voice. She corrected quickly, tilting her head as if trying to locate the sound by ear. But in that split second, she saw him. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway. His skin was weathered brown from years under the sun, and a scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, disappearing into a close-cropped, dark beard. He wore the clothes of a working man: dusty boots, worn leather chaps, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up over forearms roped with muscle. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. They were brown, deep and dark as desert wells at midnight. And they were looking directly at her. Not at her father, not at Dutch. At her. "Who the hell are you?" Dutch demanded. The stranger stepped forward, his boots thudding against the wooden floor with a deliberate rhythm. He moved like a man who knew exactly how much space he took up in the world, and didn't apologize for any of it. "Name's Elijah Stone," he said. "I break horses for a living. I'm passing through." "Then keep passing." Dutch's hand drifted toward the pistol on his hip. "This ain't your business." "It is now." Elijah reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it onto the card table. It landed with the heavy, unmistakable clink of gold coins. "How much does Whitmore owe you?" Dutch's eyes widened. He snatched up the pouch, weighing it in his palm. His expression shifted from hostility to greed in the span of a heartbeat. $60, Dutch said. "But that pouch feels like more than 60. "It's 80. Elijah's voice was flat, emotionless. 60 for the debt, 20 for the girl. She comes with me." "Now wait just a minute," Walter started. "Shut up." Elijah didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on Dutch. "Do we have a deal?" Dutch glanced at Clara, then at the gold, then back at Elijah. The calculation was visible on his face. A blind girl was a liability. Gold was gold. "Deal." Dutch pocketed the pouch. "She's yours, whatever you want her for." "No!" Clara heard her own voice before she could stop it. The word tore out of her throat, raw and desperate. "No, you can't, Pa, please!" Walter Whitmore didn't even look at her. He was already at the bar, signaling for a bottle. "Pa!" Clara lunged toward him, but Elijah's hand closed around her wrist. His grip wasn't cruel. It was firm, unbreakable, like iron wrapped in leather. "Don't." His voice was close to her ear, barely above a whisper. "Don't make a scene." "Let go of me!" "I said don't." He pulled her toward the door, ignoring her struggles. She kicked at his shins, clawed at his hand, but he didn't slow down. He simply walked, dragging her along like she weighed nothing. "You can't do this!" Clara screamed at the room. "Someone help me! Please!" Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The men of Copper Gulch watched the show, some with pity, some with amusement, none with the intention of interfering. A blind girl sold by her drunk father to a stranger? Sad, maybe, but not their problem. The saloon doors swung shut behind them. Outside, the Arizona sun hit Clara like a physical blow. The heat was brutal, relentless, turning the air into something thick and hard to breathe. She blinked behind her dark glasses, her eyes adjusting to the glare. Elijah Stone released her wrist. "You can stop pretending now." Clara froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. What? Elijah walked to a massive black horse tied to the hitching post. A stallion so tall and broad, he looked like something out of legend. He checked the cinch on the saddle, his movements unhurried. I said, "You can stop pretending." He glanced back at her, and there was something in his expression. Not cruelty, not mockery, but a kind of weary certainty. "You ain't blind, Miss Whitmore. I've been watching you for 3 days. You dodge obstacles before you reach 'em. You track movement with your eyes, not your ears. And back there in the saloon, when you heard my voice, you turned to look at me, not toward the sound, at me. A blind woman can't do that." Clara's blood turned to ice. 5 years. 5 years of perfect deception, and this stranger had seen through her in 3 days. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I can't see anything. The fever took my sight when I was 18. Rattlesnake." The word stopped her cold. "What?" "Yesterday morning." Elijah turned to face her fully. "You were walking from the general store to your father's room at the boarding house. There was a rattler sunning itself on the boardwalk. You couldn't have heard it. The street was too loud. But you saw it. You stepped around it like it was nothing. 3 paces before you reached it. A blind woman would have walked right into that snake and gotten bit." Clara's mouth opened, closed. No words came. "The day before that," Elijah continued, "a wagon nearly ran you down on Main Street. You jumped out of the way half a second before it reached you. No blind person has reflexes that fast. And this morning, when the shopkeeper shortchanged you by a nickel, you knew. You didn't feel the coins. You looked at them, just for a second. But I saw it." He stepped closer. Clara forced herself not to back away. "So here's what's going to happen," Elijah said quietly. "You're going to get on that horse. You're going to ride with me out of this town. And somewhere on the trail, when we're far enough from listening ears, you're going to tell me why a woman with perfect eyesight has spent the last 5 years pretending to be blind." "And if I refuse?" Elijah's expression didn't change. "Then I'll ride back into that saloon and tell Dutch Brennan and every man in there that you've been fooling them for years. I'll tell them you heard every secret they whispered when they thought you couldn't understand. I'll tell them you saw every crooked deal, every hidden card, every stolen kiss. And then I'll leave you to their mercy." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. He wasn't bluffing. She could see it in his eyes, that same cold certainty that had let him walk into a saloon full of armed men and buy a woman like he was purchasing a horse. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care whether I can see or not?" Elijah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. "Because I can't." Clara blinked. "What?" "I can't see. Not the way you can." He looked away, out at the sun-bleached street, the distant mountains shimmering in the heat. "I see shapes, movement, light and dark. But colors? They're gone. Everything looks the same to me. Shades of gray. Has been that way for 4 years, ever since a man caved in my skull with a rifle butt and left me for dead." Clara stared at him. The scar on his face, the way he'd moved through the saloon, confident but careful, like a man navigating by memory rather than sight. "You're colorblind," she said slowly. "Completely." Elijah turned back to her. "Do you know what that means out here in the desert, Miss Whitmore? It means I can't tell a green plant from a brown one. Can't find water when I'm dying of thirst because I can't see the color difference that says, 'dig here.' Can't spot a coral snake hiding in the rocks because the red and yellow don't look any different from the brown." He took another step toward her. They were close now, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the gray threads in his dark hair. "I need eyes," he said. "Good eyes. eyes that can see what I can't. And from what I've observed, yours are the best I've ever encountered. You spotted a rattlesnake from 30 feet away on a crowded street. You can probably see a rider on the horizon when most folks would just see dust. I can. The admission slipped out before Clara could stop it. Elijah nodded, unsurprised. Then we have a deal. You ride with me. You be my eyes. And in exchange, I get you out of this town, away from your father, away from whatever you've been hiding from for 5 years. You don't know what I've been hiding from. No, but I know what it looks like when someone's running scared. His voice softened, just slightly. I've worn that look myself. Clara studied him, really studied him, for the first time using her full vision instead of the careful, unfocused gaze she'd perfected over the years. He was older than she'd first thought, maybe mid-30s. The scar on his face told a story of violence, but his hands, when they'd held her wrist, hadn't been cruel. Strong, yes, inescapable, but not cruel.
"What's waiting for you out there?" she asked. "Where are we going?"
That's my business.
"If I'm riding into danger, I deserve to know."
Elijah's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he exhaled, a long, slow breath that seemed to carry years of exhaustion. "There's a man," he said. "A man who killed my wife and daughter 4 years ago. He sent raiders to burn my homestead because I wouldn't sell him my land. I was supposed to die too, but I didn't. And I've spent every day since then hunting down the men who did it." Clara's heart clenched. "Did you find them?" 4 out of 5. Something dark moved behind his eyes. "The 5th is the one who gave the orders. He's a powerful man now. Untouchable, they say. Lives in a town called Silver Creek, about 100 miles from here." "And you're going to kill him?" It wasn't a question. Elijah met her gaze. "I'm going to make him answer for what he did. Whether that means killing or dying, I don't much care anymore. But I can't get to him alone. Not blind to colors in a desert that'll kill you for a single mistake. I need someone who can see what I can't." He held out his hand. "So, Miss Whitmore, do we have a deal?" Clara looked at his hand, looked at the saloon behind her, where her father was probably already 3 drinks deep into forgetting she existed. Looked at the road stretching out of town, toward the mountains, toward the unknown. She thought about the night 5 years ago, when she'd watched her father kill a man through the crack in her bedroom door. She thought about the blood on the floor, the money her father had taken from the dead man's pockets, the look in his eyes when he'd turned and seen her watching. "You say anything," he'd hissed, grabbing her by the throat, "and I'll tell them you did it. I'll tell them you went crazy and stabbed him."
Who are they going to believe? Me or a hysterical girl?
She'd been 18, terrified, alone. So she'd become blind. She'd closed her eyes to the world and let everyone believe she couldn't see. Because if she couldn't see, she couldn't witness. And if she couldn't witness, she couldn't testify. Her father's secret had become her prison, and she'd been serving a sentence for a crime she didn't commit. But now, standing in the scorching heat of Copper Gulch, Arizona, with a scarred stranger offering her a way out, Clara Jane Whitmore opened her eyes. Really opened them. For the first time in 5 years. "Deal." She took his hand. Elijah's grip was firm, warm, a handshake between equals, not a transaction between master and property. "Then let's ride." He lifted her onto the horse's saddle as easily as if she weighed nothing, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and for a moment, she was surrounded by the smell of leather, sweat, and sage. "One more thing," he said, his voice a low rumble near her ear. "What?" "My condition, the color blindness. It's not something I advertise. The men I'm hunting, they don't know about it. If they did, they'd use it against me. So as far as anyone else is concerned, I can see just fine. You understand?" Clara nodded slowly. "Your secret for mine." Something like that. He kicked the horse into motion, and Copper Gulch began to shrink behind them. Clara watched the town grow smaller. The saloon where she'd been sold. The boarding house where her father would wake up tomorrow and wonder where his meal ticket had gone. The church she'd never set foot in, because what was the point of praying when God had clearly forgotten she existed? None of it mattered anymore. She was riding toward danger, toward vengeance, toward a confrontation with a powerful man who had already destroyed one family and wouldn't hesitate to destroy another. But for the first time in 5 years, Clara Jane Whitmore was moving forward instead of standing still. And somewhere ahead of them, in a town called Silver Creek, a man named Solomon Barrett was about to learn that the past had a way of catching up, even to those who thought they'd buried it forever. The horse's hooves beat against the hard-packed earth, carrying them away from everything Clara had ever known. The sun blazed overhead, merciless and eternal. The desert stretched out before them, brown and gold and deadly. "Miss Whitmore," Elijah said, after they'd ridden in silence for nearly an hour. "Clara," she corrected. "If we're going to be partners, you should call me Clara." A pause, then, "Clara, there's something moving on the ridge to our left, about a mile out. I can see the shape, but I can't tell what it is. Animal or human?" Clara turned her head, squinting against the glare. Her eyes, trained by years of secret watching, picked out the details instantly. "2 riders," she said. "They've been following us since we left town. They're keeping their distance, staying just below the ridgeline. One of them has a rifle across his saddle." Elijah's body tensed behind her. "Dutch's men?" "Maybe, or maybe someone else." She paused. "The one with the rifle, he's wearing a gray coat, even in this heat. That's strange." "Gray coat." Elijah's voice was tight. "Barrett's men wear gray. It's his mark." "Barrett? The man you're hunting?" "He knows I'm coming." Elijah's hand moved to the pistol on his hip. "He's been sending men after me for months. Hired guns, bounty hunters. They never get close enough to take me, but they keep coming." "How did he know we'd leave today?" "He didn't. But he knew I was in Copper Gulch. He's had eyes on me since I crossed into Arizona." Elijah adjusted the reins, urging the horse to move faster. "We need to reach the canyon before nightfall. There's a place I know, hidden, defensible. We can lose them there." Clara looked back at the ridge. The 2 riders had disappeared below the line, but she knew they were still there, watching, waiting. "Elijah," she said quietly. "Yeah?" "There's a 3rd rider, behind us. He just came over the rise about 2 miles back. He's not trying to hide." Elijah swore under his breath. "They're boxing us in." "What do we do?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then his arms tightened around her, pulling her closer against his chest. "We ride," he said grimly. "And we pray your eyes are as good as I think they are. Because if they catch us out in the open, we're dead." The horse surged forward, hooves pounding the earth like a war drum. The desert blurred around them, heat waves shimmering off the rocks. Behind them, the 3rd rider had begun to close the distance. Clara gripped the saddle horn, her heart racing. 3 days ago, she'd been a blind girl in a dusty saloon, invisible and forgotten. Now she was racing across the Arizona desert with a vengeful stranger, hunted by men who killed for money, heading toward a confrontation that would end in blood. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Alive. "Elijah," she said, her voice steady despite the pounding hooves and the whipping wind. "What?"
"The canyon you mentioned. How far?"
10 miles, maybe 12. Clara looked ahead, her eagle eyes scanning the horizon. She saw the dark line of the canyon mouth, the rocky outcroppings that would provide cover, the narrow pass that would force their pursuers to approach single file.
"There's a shorter route," she said, "through that dry wash to the right. It cuts behind those bluffs and comes out near the canyon's back entrance. The ground is harder there, won't show our tracks as clearly."
Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then, "You can see all that from here?"
"I can see the wash. I can see the bluffs.
"I can see the game trails that animals use to move between them." She paused.
"I told you, my eyes are good."
Good ain't the word. There was something new in his voice, something that might have been respect. "All right, Clara, you're my eyes now. Which way?" Clara pointed.
"Hard right, past that tall saguaro. Then follow my directions exactly."
Elijah pulled the reins, and the horse veered off the main trail. Behind them, the third rider crested the rise and began shouting to his companions. But Clara didn't look back. She looked forward, toward the canyon, toward the unknown, toward whatever waited for them in the burning heart of the desert. For better or worse, her new life had begun. The dry wash was narrower than Clara had expected. The horse's sides scraped against the rocky walls as Elijah urged him forward, and Clara had to duck to avoid low-hanging branches of scrub oak that reached out like grasping fingers. "How much further?" Elijah's voice was tight with controlled tension. Clara squinted ahead, her eyes tracking the twisting path. "Quarter mile, maybe less. The wash opens up near those red rocks. Then we cut left toward the canyon mouth." "And our friends?" She looked back over her shoulder. The dust cloud that had marked their pursuer's position was gone. "I can't see them. Either they lost us or they know where we're headed and they're taking the main trail to cut us off." Elijah swore softly. "Barrett's men ain't stupid. They've hunted this territory for years." "Then we need to move faster." "Shadow's doing his best. This ground ain't easy for him." Clara felt the horse's labored breathing, the strain in his muscles. She'd grown up around horses, knew when an animal was being pushed to its limits. Shadow was close. "There," she pointed to a gap in the wash wall. "We can climb out there, cut across the flat, and reach the canyon from the south side. It's exposed, but it's faster." Elijah didn't hesitate. He pulled Shadow to a stop, dismounted, and reached up to help Clara down. His hands were warm and strong around her waist, and for a moment their eyes met. "You trust me?" he asked.
"I don't have much choice."
"That ain't what I asked." Clara held his gaze. In the harsh afternoon light, his face was all angles and shadows, the scar standing out like a brand. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes that saw the world in shades of gray, were steady, honest.
"I trust you," she said. "God help me, but I do."
Something flickered across his face, not quite a smile, but close. "Then stay behind me. If shooting starts, you get down and you stay down. Understand?"
"I'm not helpless, Elijah."
"I know you ain't, but you also ain't armed, and those men won't hesitate to put a bullet in you just to slow me down." He pulled his pistol from its holster and pressed it into her hands. "You know how to use this?" Clara looked at the gun. It was heavier than she expected, the metal warm from his body heat. "Point and pull the trigger." "Close enough. 6 shots. Make 'em count." They scrambled up the rocky incline, Shadow following with the sure-footed grace of a horse born to rough country. The flat stretched before them, 100 yards of open ground with no cover. Beyond it, the canyon mouth yawned like the entrance to another world. "Ready?" Elijah asked. Clara nodded. They ran. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Clara's lungs burned with the effort. Her dress tangled around her legs, slowing her down, and she cursed herself for not thinking to change into something more practical. 5 years of pretending to be blind meant 5 years of wearing what her father chose for her. Delicate things. Helpless things. She wasn't helpless anymore. They were halfway across the flat when the first shot rang out. Clara heard the bullet whine past her ear, close enough to feel the displaced air. She stumbled, and Elijah's hand closed around her arm, pulling her forward. "Keep moving!" Another shot. This one kicked up dust 3 feet to their left. Clara risked a glance back and saw them, 2 riders, emerging from the main trail, rifles raised. The third rider was nowhere in sight. "Where's the third one?" she gasped. "Don't know. Don't care. Move!" They reached the canyon mouth just as a third shot cracked through the air. This one was closer, and Clara heard Elijah grunt. She looked over and saw blood spreading across his left shoulder. "You're hit!" "It's nothing. Get inside." The canyon swallowed them, its walls rising up on either side like the gates of a fortress. The temperature dropped immediately, the shade a blessed relief after the brutal sun. But Clara couldn't enjoy it. She was too busy watching Elijah's face go pale, watching him stumble against the rock wall. "Let me see." She grabbed his arm, turning him toward her. "We don't have time. We don't have time for you to bleed out, either." Her voice was sharper than she intended. "Let me see, Elijah." He stopped arguing. Maybe it was the blood loss. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. Either way, he leaned against the canyon wall and let her pull his shirt aside. The wound was ugly, but not fatal. The bullet had torn through the meat of his shoulder, missing the bone by inches. Blood flowed freely, but it wasn't the bright arterial red that meant death. "It went clean through," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We need to stop the bleeding." "Saddlebag. There's cloth in there, and a bottle of whiskey." Clara ran to Shadow, who had followed them into the canyon with the calm determination of a horse who'd seen worse. She dug through the saddlebag, finding the items Elijah had mentioned, along with a length of rope, some jerky, and a worn leather journal that she didn't have time to examine. When she returned, Elijah had slid down the wall to sit on the ground. His face was gray, sheened with sweat, but his eyes were still sharp, still alert. "Pour the whiskey on it," he said through gritted teeth. "Don't be gentle." Clara unscrewed the cap and hesitated. "This is going to hurt." "I've had worse." She poured. Elijah's entire body went rigid, and a sound escaped his throat. Not quite a scream, but close. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, squeezing hard enough to bruise. "Son of a—" He cut himself off, breathing hard. All right. Wrap it up." Clara worked quickly, folding the cloth into a pad and pressing it against the wound, then wrapping more cloth around his shoulder to hold it in place. Her hands were steady, her movements efficient. Another surprise from her years of false blindness. She'd learned to do everything by touch, and that skill served her now. "You've done this before," Elijah said, watching her. "My mother was a healer. Before she died." Clara tied off the bandage and sat back on her heels. "She taught me what she could." "How old were you when she passed?" "I was born, and she was gone." Clara looked away. "Died, giving life to me. My father never let me forget it." Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's a heavy burden for a child to carry." "It's the only burden I've ever known." The sound of hoofbeats echoed through the canyon, distant but approaching. Clara's head snapped up, her eyes scanning the narrow passage behind them. "They're coming." Elijah tried to stand, but his legs buckled. Clara caught him, her shoulder under his arm, taking his weight. "You can't fight like this," she said. "Don't have much choice." He reached for his pistol and realized Clara still had it. "Give me the gun."
"You can barely stand. You'll miss."
"I don't miss."
"Elijah."
She looked up at him, and something passed between them, something that had no name, but felt as real as the rock beneath their feet. "Let me help you. That's why I'm here, isn't it? To be your eyes?" He stared at her for a long moment. The hoofbeats grew louder. "There's a ledge," he finally said. "About 20 feet up, on the left side. Can you see it?" Clara looked. Her eagle eyes found it instantly. A narrow shelf of rock, partially hidden by an overhang, wide enough for 2 people to lie flat. "I see it." "Can you climb?" "Can you?" Elijah's jaw tightened. "I'll manage." It was the hardest climb of Clara's life. The rock was rough and unforgiving, tearing at her hands and knees. Elijah moved beside her, his injured arm hanging useless, his good arm doing the work of 2. More than once, she thought he would fall. More than once, she reached out to steady him, her hand on his back, his hip, whatever she could reach. They made it to the ledge just as the 2 riders entered the canyon below. Clara pressed herself flat against the rock, her heart pounding so loud she was sure the men could hear it. Beside her, Elijah lay motionless, his breathing shallow, his face turned toward the canyon floor. "See anything?" one of the riders called out. His voice echoed off the walls. "Blood!" The second rider had dismounted and was examining the spot where Elijah had sat. "Fresh! They came this way." "Barrett wants him alive, if possible." "Barrett wants a lot of things," the second rider spat. "I say we shoot him and be done with it. Stone's been a thorn in his side for too long." "And the girl?" "What about her? She's blind. Ain't like she's gonna identify us." Clara felt Elijah tense beside her. His hand moved slowly, silently, toward the knife on his belt. "They went deeper in," the first rider said, swinging back onto his horse. "Come on, we'll catch him at the other end. There's only one way out of this canyon." The second rider hesitated, his eyes scanning the walls. For a terrible moment, Clara thought he was looking directly at her. She held her breath, willing herself to become invisible. Then he shrugged, mounted his horse, and followed his partner deeper into the canyon. The sound of hoofbeats faded, swallowed by the stone. Clara didn't move. Neither did Elijah. They lay there, pressed together on the narrow ledge, until the silence was complete. "They're gone," Clara finally whispered. "For now." Elijah's voice was weak, strained. "They'll figure out we doubled back eventually. We need to move." "You need to rest." "I'll rest when I'm dead." He tried to push himself up and immediately collapsed, his face going white. "Damn it!" Clara sat up, looking down at him. In the dim light of the canyon, he looked older, more fragile. The blood had soaked through her bandage, spreading in a dark stain across the cloth. "You're still bleeding." "I noticed." "Elijah, you can't—" "I know what I can't do." His voice was harsh, frustrated. "I know I'm useless like this. I know I'm slowing us down. I know Barrett's men are going to find us and put bullets in both our heads. You don't need to tell me what I already know." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Elijah went still. "My mother," Clara said softly, "died bringing me into this world. My father spent 18 years making sure I knew it was my fault. And then one night, I watched him kill a man for $50. He saw me watching. He told me if I ever said anything, he'd swear I did it. He'd watch them hang me for murder." Elijah's fingers tightened around hers. "So I became blind," Clara continued. "I closed my eyes and I didn't open them for 5 years. I let the whole world think I was helpless and broken. I let them pity me. I let them ignore me. Because being invisible
was safer than being seen.
She looked down at their joined hands. His were large, calloused, scarred from years of hard work. Hers were smaller, softer, but no less marked by the life she'd lived.
"You bought me from my father for $80, she said. "You dragged me out of that saloon and put me on your horse and told me I was going to be your eyes. You didn't ask. You didn't give me a choice. You just took me."
Elijah said nothing. His face was unreadable.
"But here's the thing."
Clara met his eyes.
"For the first time in 5 years, someone saw me. Really saw me. Not the blind girl, not the helpless burden. Me. And that's worth more than any amount of gold."
She squeezed his hand.
"So you're going to stop talking about what you can't do, and you're going to let me help you. Because that's what partners do. And whether you like it or not, Elijah Stone, we're partners now. Understand?"
For a long moment, Elijah just stared at her. Then, slowly, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched upward.
"Yes, ma'am,"
he said quietly. "Good." Clara released his hand and began examining the ledge.
"Now, there's got to be another way out of this canyon. One of those men don't know about."
"There is." Elijah shifted, wincing at the movement. "About a quarter-mile back, there's a crack in the wall. Too narrow for horses, but a person on foot can squeeze through. It comes out on the other side of the ridge, near a creek."
"Can you make it that far?"
"I'll have to." Getting down from the ledge was harder than getting up. Elijah's strength was fading fast, and more than once Clara had to catch him, brace him, keep him from tumbling to the canyon floor. By the time they reached the bottom, her arms were shaking with exhaustion. "Shadow," Elijah said, looking around. "Where?" A soft whinny answered him. The big black stallion emerged from a side passage, his eyes intelligent, his ears pricked forward. He walked straight to Elijah and pressed his nose against his chest. "Good boy." Elijah's voice cracked with something that might have been emotion. "Good boy."
"He hid," Clara said, amazed. "He hid from those men."
"Shadow's smarter than most people I know." Elijah ran his good hand along the horse's neck. "He's been with me since the beginning, since before—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to.
"Can he get through the crack in the wall?"
Clara asked. "No, but he can find his own way out. He's done it before." Elijah looked at the horse, and something passed between them. A silent understanding forged through years of trust. "Go on, boy. Find me at the creek." Shadow tossed his head, snorted once, and turned to disappear into the shadows. His hoofbeats echoed briefly, then faded to nothing.
"He'll meet us on the other side?"
Clara asked. "If anything can, it's him." They moved slowly through the canyon, Elijah leaning heavily on Clara's shoulder. The crack he'd mentioned was exactly where he said it would be. A narrow fissure in the rock, barely wide enough for a person to pass through sideways. "You first," Elijah said. Clara looked at the gap, then at him.
"You won't fit."
"I'll fit. Just go." She went. The rock pressed in on her from both sides, scraping against her back and chest. The darkness was absolute, suffocating. She couldn't see. For the first time in 5 years, she understood what true blindness felt like. She pushed forward, inch by inch, until suddenly the rock opened up and she stumbled out into the fading light of evening. The creek was there, just as Elijah had promised, a thin ribbon of water cutting through the barren land. And beside it, waiting patiently, was Shadow. "Elijah?" Clara called back into the fissure. A grunt, a scrape, a muttered curse. Then Elijah emerged, pale as death, blood streaming fresh from his shoulder where the rock had torn the bandage away. He took 2 steps toward the creek. and collapsed.
"Elijah!"
Clara ran to him, dropping to her knees beside his prone form. She rolled him onto his back, pressing her hands against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding that seemed determined to take him. His eyes were open, but unfocused. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear.
"Don't you dare!"
Clara hissed, pressing harder.
"Don't you dare die on me, Elijah Stone. You bought me fair and square, remember? You don't get to leave me out here alone."
His hand came up, weak and trembling, and touched her cheek.
"Clara, I'm here. I'm right here. There's something—"
His eyes cleared for a moment, focusing on her face with terrible intensity.
"Something I didn't tell you. About Barrett. About why he wants me dead. Tell me later. Right now you need to. He's my brother."
The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She stopped breathing.
"Solomon Barrett,"
Elijah said, his voice fading to a whisper.
"He's my half-brother. Same father, different mothers. He's the one who ordered the raid, who killed my wife, my daughter. He did it because I wouldn't give him the land our father left me, the land that's got silver underneath it. Enough silver to make a man rich beyond measure." Clara stared at him. "Your own brother?"
Blood don't mean much to some folks. Elijah's eyes were closing. He wanted what was mine, and when I wouldn't give it, he took everything else instead. His hand fell away from her cheek.
"Elijah? Elijah!"
But Elijah Stone didn't answer. His body went limp in her arms, his chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Clara looked around desperately. The creek, the horse, the empty wilderness stretching out in every direction. She was alone. And somewhere out there, in a town called Silver Creek, a monster named Solomon Barrett was waiting for them. A monster who shared Elijah's blood. A monster who had already destroyed one family and wouldn't hesitate to destroy another. Clara bent down and pressed her forehead against Elijah's.
"You listen to me," she whispered fiercely. "You don't get to die. Not yet. Not until you've made him pay. Not until you've looked him in the eye and shown him what happens to men who think they can take what doesn't belong to them."
She lifted her head, her jaw set with determination.
"And not until you've kept your promise to me. You said you'd get me out. You said you'd give me a new life. Well, this ain't it, Elijah Stone. This is just the beginning."
She stood up, grabbed Shadow's reins, and began to drag Elijah's unconscious body toward the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors Elijah would never see. But Clara saw them all, and she would see enough for both of them. Clara worked through the night. She tore strips from her petticoat to make fresh bandages. She boiled creek water in a tin cup she found in Shadow's saddlebag. She cleaned the wound, packed it with a poultice of sage and mud the way her mother's journal had described, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Elijah's fever came with the moon. His body burned like a furnace, and he thrashed against her, muttering names she didn't recognize. Sarah, Emma, over and over, like a prayer or a curse. His wife, his daughter. Clara held him down, wiped the sweat from his brow, and whispered words she hoped he couldn't hear.
"Stay with me, please. Stay with me."
By dawn, the fever broke. Elijah's eyes opened, clouded with confusion, and found her face.
"Clara?" "I'm here."
Her voice was hoarse from exhaustion.
"You scared me half to death, Elijah Stone."
He tried to sit up and immediately fell back, groaning.
"How long?" "All night. You lost a lot of blood."
She pressed a hand against his forehead, checking his temperature.
Fever's gone, but you're weak.
We need to rest here another day, at least. We don't have another day. Then you'll have to make one. Clara's tone left no room for argument. Those men think we went deeper into the canyon. They'll spend today searching for us there. By the time they realize we doubled back, you'll be strong enough to ride. Elijah stared at her. In the pale morning light, she looked different than she had in the saloon. Harder, more real. Her dark spectacles were gone, lost somewhere in the canyon, and her green eyes met his without flinching. You stayed, he said quietly. Where else would I go? You could have taken Shadow, ridden back to Copper Gulch, told them I kidnapped you. And then what? Go back to my father? Let him sell me to the next man with gold in his pocket? Clara shook her head. I told you, Elijah, we're partners now. Partners don't leave each other to die. Something shifted in his expression. Something that might have been gratitude, or wonder, or something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. You're a strange woman, Clara Whitmore. You're a strange man, Elijah Stone. She stood up, brushing the dirt from her ruined dress. Now rest. I'm going to see if I can find us something to eat. She was gone before he could argue. Clara followed the creek upstream, her eyes scanning the banks for anything edible. Her mother's journal had taught her to recognize wild onions, cattail roots, the berries that were safe and the ones that would kill you. 5 years of pretending to be blind had made her observant in ways most people never learned. She found a patch of watercress growing in the shallows and was gathering handfuls when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Distant, but approaching. Clara dropped flat against the creek bank, pressing herself into the mud. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she strained to see through the brush. A single rider emerged from the tree line. Not one of Barrett's men in their gray coats. This rider was younger, darker-skinned, with a wide-brimmed hat and a rifle across his saddle. He was tracking someone. His eyes swept the ground, reading signs Clara couldn't see. Then he stopped. His gaze lifted from the ground and seemed to look directly at her hiding spot. Clara held her breath. You can come out, the rider called. I ain't gonna hurt you. She didn't move. I'm looking for a friend, he continued. Big fella, scar on his face. Rides a black stallion named Shadow. You wouldn't happen to know where he is, would you? Clara's mind raced. A friend? Or another hunter sent by Barrett? My name's Tomas Reyes, the rider said, dismounting slowly. Eli saved my life 3 years ago. Pulled me out of a river when I was half drowned and too stupid to swim. I've been riding with him ever since. Well, until about a week ago, when he said he had to handle something alone. He took a step toward her hiding spot. I tracked him to Copper Gulch. Heard he bought a woman from her father and rode out of town like the devil himself was chasing him. Figured the devil probably was. He paused. So if you're that woman, and if you know where Eli is, I'd appreciate it if you'd tell me. Because from the blood I've been following, he needs help more than his stubborn pride will ever admit. Clara made a decision. She rose from her hiding spot, mud clinging to her dress, watercress still clutched in her hand. Tomas looked at her. Then he smiled. A warm, genuine smile that transformed his weathered face. Well now, he said, you must be something special. Eli don't usually let folks get close enough to help him bleed. He didn't have much choice. Clara's voice was steady, but her legs were shaking. He's back at our camp, about half a mile downstream. Then let's not keep him waiting. Elijah's reaction to seeing Tomas was somewhere between relief and fury. I told you to stay in Tucson. And I told you I don't take orders from stubborn fools who think they can take on Barrett alone. Tomas knelt beside him, examining the wound with practiced eyes.
You look like hell, amigo.
Feel like it too.
Good. Maybe next time you'll listen to me.
Tomas looked at Clara.
You did this? The bandaging? Yes. You saved his life. Another few hours without treatment, infection would have set in.
He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small leather pouch.
I've got proper medical supplies. Needle, thread, carbolic acid. Let me close this up right.
Clara watched as Tomas worked on Elijah's shoulder. His movements were quick, efficient. The movements of someone who'd done this many times before. "How did you find us?" Elijah asked through gritted teeth as the needle pierced his skin.
Wasn't easy. You cover your tracks well, but you taught me everything I know, remember? I just looked for what you'd miss.
What I'd miss? Tomas glanced at Clara.
The color of the flowers you trampled. Yellow petals on brown ground. Stands out like a beacon if you know what to look for.
Elijah closed his eyes. Damn.
It's not your fault, Eli. It's just how it is.
Tomas tied off the last stitch and sat back.
Barrett's got men all over these hills. 12, maybe 15. Professional hunters. He's offering 5,000 for you alive. 1,000 dead.
He wants to kill me himself, Elijah said flatly.
Probably, but he also wants something else. Word is he's been tearing apart the old homestead, digging up the fields, looking for something.
The mine. Clara looked at Elijah.
What mine?
Elijah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, lost in memory. My father was a prospector. Spent his whole life looking for the big strike. Everyone thought he was crazy, chasing dreams in the dirt. Then, about 10 years ago, he found it. A silver vein running under our land. Richest deposit anyone had ever seen.
But he didn't tell anyone, Tomas added. He was paranoid. Thought if word got out, men would come to take it. So he mapped the location, hid the map, and only told Eli where it was.
Barrett knew about the silver, Elijah continued. Our father told him on his deathbed. Told him to work with me, to share the wealth. But Solomon never wanted to share anything. He wanted it all.
So he killed your family to force you to give up the location, Clara said,
the horror of it settling into her bones. He thought if he took everything I loved, I'd break. I'd tell him where the mine was, just to make the pain stop. Elijah's jaw tightened. He was wrong.
The map, Clara said slowly. Do you still have it?
Elijah reached up with his good hand and touched his chest. It's here, tattooed on my skin. My father did it himself, the night before he died. Said paper could be stolen. But this I'd carry forever. Clara stared at him.
That's why Barrett wants you alive.
He needs to see the map. Needs me to translate it. Our father used symbols, codes that only we understood. Elijah's voice hardened. I'll die before I give him that satisfaction. You almost did die, Tomas said grimly. And you'll die for real if you keep trying to do this alone. Barrett's got an army. You've got one gun and a woman who, no offense, looks like she's never fired a shot in her life.
I can shoot, Clara said quietly.
Both men looked at her.
Before I went blind, before I pretended to go blind, my mother's brother taught me. He was a sharpshooter in the war. Said every woman should know how to defend herself. She met Elijah's eyes. I haven't held a gun in 5 years, but I remember.
Tomas let out a low whistle.
Eli, where did you find this woman?
In a saloon, being sold by her father. And you bought her because I needed eyes. Elijah's gaze stayed locked on Clara. But I'm starting to think I got a lot more than that. They rested through the day, taking turns keeping watch. Clara slept fitfully, her dreams filled with blood and gunfire, and the sound of her father's voice telling her she was worthless. When she woke, the sun was setting and Elijah was sitting up, his color better, his eyes clearer. "We need to talk," he said. Clara sat up, pushing her tangled hair from her face. "About what?" "About what happens next." He looked at Tomas, who was tending to the horses nearby, then back at her. "I'm going to Silver Creek. I'm going to face Barrett. And there's a good chance I won't survive." "Elijah, let me finish." He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, steady. "You've done more for me in 2 days than anyone has done in 4 years. You saved my life. You stayed when you could have run. You saw me, really saw me, when I'm used to being invisible." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "But this ain't your fight," Elijah continued. "Barrett, the silver, my family, none of that has anything to do with you. Tomas can take you south, to Tucson. There's a woman there, a widow who runs a boarding house. She'd give you work, a place to stay, a chance to start over." "You're sending me away?" "I'm giving you a choice, something nobody's ever given you before." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "You don't owe me anything, Clara. I bought you like property, and I hate myself for it. But I can set that right. I can give you your freedom." Clara looked at their joined hands. She thought about the boarding house in Tucson. A quiet life, a safe life. No more running, no more hiding, no more pretending. Then she thought about Elijah riding into Silver Creek alone, facing his brother, dying probably in some dusty street while Barrett watched and smiled. "No," Elijah blinked. "No?" "I said no." Clara pulled her hand free and stood up, squaring her shoulders. "You don't get to save me and then ride off to die. That's not how this works." "Clara." "You needed eyes. You still need eyes. Tomas said it himself. Barrett's got men everywhere. Men who can see colors you can't, track signs you'll miss. How long do you think you'll last without someone watching your blind side?" "This isn't your fight," Elijah repeated, but his voice was weaker now. "You made it my fight when you pulled me out of that saloon. You made it my fight when you trusted me with your secret. You made it my fight when you—" She stopped, her voice cracking. "When you made me feel like I mattered." She didn't say the words. She didn't have to. They hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Elijah stood up slowly, his wounded shoulder pulling tight. He crossed the distance between them, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. "If you come with me," he said quietly, "you might die." "If I leave you," Clara replied, "I'll never forgive myself." He reached up, tucking the strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek. "You really are something special, Clara Jane Whitmore." "I'm just a woman who's tired of being afraid." Tomas cleared his throat loudly from across the camp. "Not to interrupt whatever this is, but we've got company." Clara and Elijah sprang apart. Tomas was pointing to the horizon, where a dust cloud was rising in the fading light. "How many?" Elijah demanded. 6, maybe 8 riders? Coming fast." Clara's eagle eyes focused on the distant figures. 7. They're wearing gray coats, and—" Her blood ran cold. "There's a carriage behind them. Black, with gold trim." Elijah's face went hard as stone. "Barrett. He's come himself." "We can't outrun them," Tomas said. "Not with Eli wounded and one horse between 2 people." "We don't run." Elijah pulled his pistol and checked the chambers. "There's a box canyon about a mile east. One way in, one way out. If we can reach it before they reach us, we can funnel them into a kill zone." "Eli, that's suicide." "It's strategy." He looked at Clara. "Can you shoot from horseback?" "I don't know. I've never tried." Then you're about to learn. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward Shadow. Tomas, you lead them east. Make them think we're running. Clara and I will circle around and hit them from behind.
That's insane.
That's the plan. Now go. Tomas swore in Spanish, swung onto his horse, and took off toward the east. The dust cloud shifted, following him. Elijah mounted Shadow and pulled Clara up behind him. Hold on to me. Don't let go no matter what. Clara wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing herself against his back. She could feel his heart beating, fast but steady.
Elijah?
Yeah?
I lied before. About being tired of being afraid?
She buried her face in his shoulder. I'm terrified. Good. He kicked Shadow into motion. Fear keeps you alive. Just don't let it make you stupid. They rode hard, circling wide around the approaching riders. Clara kept her eyes on them, tracking their position, calling out adjustments to Elijah's course.
They're splitting up. 4 going after Tomas, 3 staying with the carriage.
The carriage is Barrett. He never gets his hands dirty. Elijah's voice was bitter. We hit the 3 guards first, fast and quiet. Then we take the carriage.
And then?
Then I have a conversation with my brother that's been 4 years coming. They came up behind the carriage guards just as the sun disappeared below the horizon. The twilight was thick, purple-gray, and Clara felt a moment of wild irony. This was the one time Elijah's colorblindness didn't matter. Everything was shades of gray now. The first guard never saw them coming. Elijah's knife took him in the throat before he could cry out. He toppled from his horse without a sound. The second guard spun around, reaching for his gun. Clara didn't think. She raised the pistol Elijah had given her, aimed for center mass, and pulled the trigger. The kick nearly threw her off the horse, but the bullet flew true, catching the guard in the chest. He stared at her with shocked eyes, then slid sideways out of his saddle. The third guard was already galloping toward the carriage, shouting a warning.
He's getting away,
Clara cried. No, he's not. Elijah pulled his rifle from the saddle scabbard, raised it one-handed, and fired. The guard's head snapped back. He hit the ground like a puppet with cut strings. The carriage had stopped. Its door swung open, and a figure emerged. Solomon Barrett looked nothing like his brother. Where Elijah was dark and weathered, Barrett was pale and polished. He wore a suit that probably cost more than most men made in a year, and his silver-white hair was slicked back from a face that would have been handsome, if not for the cruelty in his eyes. Elijah. His voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of a man who'd never had to fight for anything in his life. I was wondering when you'd stop running. Elijah dismounted slowly, keeping his pistol trained on Barrett. Clara slid down after him, her own gun raised. Brother. Elijah spat the word like poison. You look well. Blood money agrees with you. Come now, is that any way to greet family? Barrett spread his hands, a gesture of false innocence. I've been trying to reach you for years. We have so much to discuss. There's nothing to discuss. You killed my wife, my daughter. You burned everything I loved to the ground. A regrettable necessity. Barrett's eyes flickered to Clara. And who is this? Your new acquisition? I heard you bought a blind girl in Copper Gulch, though she doesn't look very blind to me. Leave her out of this. Oh, but I don't think I will. Barrett smiled, and it was the coldest thing Clara had ever seen. You see, Elijah, I've spent 4 years tracking you. 4 years watching you hunt down my men, one by one. I've lost good employees because of your vendetta. And now here you are, wounded, exhausted, with a girl who's probably never fired a gun before tonight. His hand moved toward his coat. Don't. Elijah's voice was ice. I just want to show you something. Barrett reached slowly into his pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. Do you know what this is? Elijah didn't answer. It's a deed to your land, signed over to me by territorial court order. You've been declared dead, Elijah. Legally, officially, dead. Which means everything that was yours is now mine. The silver. Yes, the silver. Barrett's eyes gleamed. All I need is the location. Show me the map on your chest, and I'll let you walk away. Both of you. I'll give you money, horses, whatever you need to start over somewhere else. You'll let us walk away? Elijah laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Like you let Sarah and Emma walk away? That was different. That was murder. Elijah raised his pistol. And this is justice. Wait! Clara's voice cut through the tension. Both men looked at her. She stepped forward, putting herself between Elijah and Barrett. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. I have a better idea, she said. Barrett raised an eyebrow. And what idea is that, my dear? Clara turned to Elijah. His face was a mask of fury, his finger tight on the trigger. But beneath the rage, she saw something else. Something tired. Something broken. If you kill him now, she said quietly, it's murder. They'll hunt you forever. You'll never have peace. I don't want peace. I want revenge. Then let him have it. Clara turned back to Barrett. The silver. It's what you want, isn't it? More than anything? It's what I'm owed, Barrett said carefully. Then take it. Clara's voice was steady. Take the land, take the silver, take it all. But in exchange, you let Elijah go. You call off your men. You leave us alone. Clara, what are you doing? Elijah grabbed her arm. I'm saving your life. She looked up at him, her green eyes fierce. The silver isn't worth dying for. Your revenge isn't worth dying for. But living? Starting over? That's worth everything. She makes an excellent point, Barrett said smoothly. I'm a businessman, Elijah. I'd much rather have the silver than your corpse. So what do you say? Show me the map, and we all walk away from this alive. Elijah's gun hand was shaking. His whole body was shaking. Clara could see the war inside him, the rage fighting against the exhaustion, the hatred fighting against the hope. Elijah, she put her hand over his, gently lowering the pistol. Let it go. I can't. You can. For Sarah, for Emma. They wouldn't want you to die for revenge. They'd want you to live. A sound escaped his throat, something between a sob and a growl. His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. Fine. The word was barely a whisper. Fine. You win, Solomon. Take the damn silver. Barrett's smile widened. I knew you'd see reason. Elijah reached for the buttons of his shirt. His fingers were clumsy, trembling. Clara helped him, unfastening each button until his chest was bare. The map was there, inked into his skin. Lines and symbols that meant nothing to Clara, but clearly meant everything to Barrett, whose eyes went wide with greed. Beautiful, Barrett breathed. Absolutely beautiful. I'll need to copy this, of course. Hold still while I... The gunshot came from nowhere. Clara screamed. Barrett staggered backward, a red bloom spreading across his pristine white shirt. Tomas emerged from the darkness, his rifle smoking. Did you really think, he said coldly, that I'd let you trade away everything Eli's family died for? Barrett fell to his knees. His hands clutched at his chest, blood streaming between his fingers. You! He looked at Elijah with pure hatred. You planned this. No. Elijah's voice was hollow. But I should have. Barrett opened his mouth to speak again, No words came. He toppled forward into the dirt and lay still. The silence that followed was absolute. Clara stood frozen, staring at the body. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. Elijah turned to Tomas. "The other men?" "Handled. They won't be bothering anyone again." "Good." Elijah looked down at his brother's body. No triumph in his eyes. No satisfaction. Just an emptiness that seemed to go on forever. "It's over," Clara whispered. Elijah shook his head slowly. "No, it's not over. It won't be over until I bury him next to our father, until I stand at that grave and tell him what his other son became." He looked at Clara, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw tears in his eyes. "Will you come with me?" Clara took his hand. "I'll go wherever you go." They buried Solomon Barrett 3 days later in a small cemetery on the edge of what had once been Elijah's land. The grave was unmarked. Elijah said his brother didn't deserve a stone. Clara stood beside him as Tomas shoveled the last of the dirt. The morning was quiet, still, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out. "You should say something," Clara said softly. Elijah stared at the grave. His face was carved from granite, his eyes dry and distant. "What is there to say? He killed my family. He spent 4 years trying to kill me, and now he's dead." He paused. "I thought I'd feel different. I thought when this moment came there'd be some kind of peace." "And there isn't?" "There's nothing." His voice cracked. "Just emptiness. Like someone carved out everything inside me and left a hollow shell." Clara reached out and took his hand. He flinched at the contact, then slowly, gradually, his fingers curled around hers. "My father used to say," she said quietly, "that revenge is a fire. It keeps you warm while you're feeding it. But eventually, it burns through everything, and all you're left with is ash." "Your father was a drunk who sold you for whiskey money." "Doesn't mean he was wrong about everything." Clara squeezed his hand. "You spent 4 years chasing this moment, Elijah. 4 years with nothing but hate keeping you alive. Now the hate is gone. You've got to find something else to fill that space." Elijah turned to look at her. In the harsh light, she could see every line on his face, every scar, every shadow of exhaustion. "What if there's nothing left?" he asked. "What if I gave everything to the fire, and now there's nothing left to build with?" "Then you start from scratch." Clara stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of his body. "You're not dead, Elijah. You're standing here, breathing, alive. That means you get to choose what comes next." "I don't know how to do that anymore. I don't know how to live without a purpose." "Then find a new one." He looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his eyes, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "Clara, don't," she shook her head. "Don't say anything you don't mean. I'm not asking for promises. I'm not asking for declarations. I'm just saying that you've got a choice. You can stand here staring at your brother's grave until the earth swallows you too, or you can turn around and face whatever comes next." Tomas cleared his throat from across the cemetery. "Not to interrupt, but we've got company coming. Single rider, coming from the east." Elijah's hand moved to his pistol. "Barrett's men?" "Don't think so. This one's wearing a badge." The rider approached slowly, deliberately. He was an older man, gray-haired and weather-beaten, with a tin star pinned to his vest. He pulled his horse to a stop a few yards from the group and dismounted with the stiff caution of someone expecting trouble. "Elijah Stone?" Elijah stepped forward. Who's asking? Name's Sheriff Tom Brennan. I'm the law in Silver Creek. His eyes swept over the fresh grave, the shovels, the three dusty figures standing in the morning light. I heard some interesting things about what happened out on the flats 3 nights ago. Thought I'd come see for myself. And what did you hear? I heard Solomon Barrett is dead. I heard his men scattered like roaches when the shooting stopped. I heard the man who killed him is standing right here in front of me. The sheriff's hand rested on his gun belt, but he didn't draw. That about right? Tomas stepped forward. I'm the one who pulled the trigger, Sheriff. Eli had nothing to do with it.
Tomas, Elijah started.
Quiet. Tomas didn't take his eyes off the sheriff. Barrett had bounty hunters trying to kill Eli for 4 years. He burned Eli's homestead, murdered his wife and child, and ran him off his own land. What happened 3 nights ago was self-defense. Sheriff Brennan was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved from Tomas to Elijah to Clara, lingering on her torn dress and tangled hair. And who's this? Clara Whitmore, she said, lifting her chin. Mr. Stone purchased me from my father in Copper Gulch 5 days ago. Purchased you? My father sold me to pay his gambling debts. Mr. Stone bought me to save me from a worse fate. She met the sheriff's gaze without flinching. If that's a crime, then arrest me too. Something flickered in the sheriff's eyes. Respect, maybe, or surprise. Ma'am, I ain't here to arrest anyone. He turned back to Elijah. Solomon Barrett was a snake. Everyone in the territory knew it. He bought judges, bribed officials, and had anyone who crossed him killed. But he was careful. He never left evidence, never gave us anything we could use against him. So why are you here? Elijah asked. Because Barrett's dead, and his empire is crumbling. His men are gone, his money is scattered, and the territorial governor wants to know what happens next. The sheriff reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded document. This here is the deed to the Stone family land. It was transferred to Solomon Barrett 3 years ago, after you were declared legally dead. But since Barrett died without heirs, and since it turns out you ain't actually dead, the territory is willing to transfer it back to its rightful owner. Elijah stared at the document like it might bite him. The land? 2,000 acres, including mineral rights. All yours, free and clear. The sheriff held out the deed. If you want it. Elijah didn't move. Clara could see his hands trembling at his sides. Eli, Tomas's voice was gentle. Take it. It's what Sarah would have wanted. The name seemed to break something loose inside him. Elijah reached out and took the deed. His fingers traced the edges of the paper, the official seal, the signature at the bottom. There's more, the sheriff said. Barrett had a lot of enemies, powerful enemies. Now that he's gone, they're looking for someone to thank. You'd be surprised how many doors open for the man who brought down Solomon Barrett. I don't want doors. I don't want power. I just want to be left alone. Then you'll be left alone. But if you ever change your mind, the sheriff tipped his hat. Silver Creek could use a man like you, someone who ain't afraid to do what's right, even when it costs him everything. He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. The 3 of them stood in silence for a long moment. Well, Tomas finally said, that was unexpected. Elijah looked down at the deed in his hands. Clara could see the war playing out across his face, the grief, the confusion, the fragile stirring of something that might have been hope. I haven't been here in 4 years, he said quietly. Not since the fire. I couldn't face it. Then maybe it's time. Clara stepped beside him. Show me. Elijah looked at her. It's just ruins. There's nothing left.
Then show me what it was. Before the fire, before Barrett. Show me the life you built. Why? Clara took a deep breath. Because I never had a home. Not a real one. My father's house was a prison. Every place I've ever lived has been temporary, borrowed, waiting to be taken away. But you had something real, something worth fighting for. She reached up and touched his face. I want to see it, even if it's gone. I want to understand what you lost. Elijah closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. Okay, he whispered. Okay. The ride to the old homestead took most of the day. Tomas said he'd stay back in town, give them space. Clara suspected he was also giving them time to figure out what they were to each other, now that the hunt was over. They didn't talk much on the journey. Elijah rode in front, his back straight, his shoulders tense. Clara held on to him, her arms wrapped around his waist, and felt the subtle shifts in his breathing as they got closer. When they finally stopped, she understood why. The house was gone. Only the stone foundation remained, blackened and cracked from the fire that had consumed everything above it. Weeds grew through the gaps. A chimney stood alone, like a monument to something lost. This was our bedroom, Elijah said, his voice hollow. He pointed to a corner of the foundation. Sarah liked to watch the sunrise. She'd sit by the window every morning with her coffee and just watch. Clara didn't speak. She just listened. Emma's room was over there. We painted it yellow, her favorite color. He laughed, a broken sound. I don't even know what yellow looks like anymore. Haven't seen it in 4 years. But I remember she loved it. She'd spin around in that room and say it was like living inside the sun. He walked to the center of the foundation and stopped. His whole body was shaking. I wasn't here when they came. I was in town, buying supplies. By the time I saw the smoke, by the time I got back, he fell to his knees. They were already gone. Sarah was in the bedroom. Emma was in the hall. She'd been trying to reach her mother. Clara knelt beside him. She didn't touch him. She just stayed close. Barrett's men were waiting for me. They wanted to make sure I saw everything before they killed me. They beat me half to death and left me in the fire. His voice dropped to a whisper. I should have died. God knows I wanted to. But the roof collapsed, and the smoke got thick, and somehow I crawled out. I survived, and I've been trying to figure out why ever since. Maybe this is why, Clara said softly. Maybe you survived so you could be here right now. So you could take back what was stolen. So you could build again. Build what? A house? On top of their graves? No. Clara reached out and took his hand. A life. A new life. Not forgetting them, not replacing them, but honoring them. By living. By being happy. By doing something with all this pain besides drowning in it. Elijah looked at her. Really looked at her. The way he had in the saloon when he first saw through her disguise. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's the hardest thing in the world. But it's possible. She squeezed his hand. I know because I'm trying to do the same thing. I spent 5 years pretending to be someone I wasn't. 5 years hiding from a truth I was too scared to face. And then you came along and dragged me out of that saloon, and suddenly I couldn't hide anymore. I didn't give you a choice. No, but you gave me something better. You gave me a reason to stop hiding. Clara moved closer. Elijah, I don't know what happens next. I don't know if we stay here or leave. If we build a house or burn what's left. If we spend the rest of our lives together or go our separate ways tomorrow. But I know one thing. What? I don't want to be alone anymore. And I don't think you do either.
The space between them shrank. Clara could feel his breath on her face, could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes that he'd never see himself. "I'm broken," he said. "So am I. I don't know how to love someone anymore. I don't know if I remember how." "Then we'll figure it out together." His hand came up to cup her face. His touch was tentative, uncertain. The touch of a man who'd forgotten what gentleness felt like. "Clara Jane Whitmore," he said quietly, "you are the most stubborn, infuriating, extraordinary woman I have ever met." Is that a compliment or a complaint? I honestly don't know. And then he kissed her. It wasn't like anything Clara had imagined. It wasn't soft or romantic or gentle. It was desperate, hungry. The kiss of two people who'd been starving for connection and finally found food. She wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, feeling the heat of his body, the strength of his arms, the hammering of his heart against her chest. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "That was," Clara started. "Yeah. We should probably—" "Yeah." They stared at each other. Then, impossibly, they both started to laugh. It wasn't happy laughter. It was the laugh of exhaustion, of relief, of two people who'd been running for so long they'd forgotten what standing still felt like. Clara laughed until tears streamed down her face, and Elijah laughed until he was doubled over, holding his wounded shoulder. "We're a mess," Clara finally gasped. "Complete disaster," Elijah agreed. "What are we going to do?" Elijah straightened up. He looked around the ruins of his old home, then back at Clara. Something had changed in his face. The emptiness was still there, but it was no longer absolute. There were cracks now, and through the cracks, something new was beginning to grow. "I think," he said slowly, "we're going to build a house." Clara blinked. "A house?" "Right here, on this foundation. New walls, new roof, new everything." He walked to the edge of the foundation and looked out at the land beyond. "The silver is still down there, under the hills, enough to make us rich 10 times over. But I don't care about being rich. I just want a place to live, a place to start over." "Elijah, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He turned back to her. "Clara, I bought you in that saloon. I paid $80 for you like you were livestock. That was wrong. I knew it was wrong even as I was doing it. But I couldn't think of another way." "You saved me." "I saved myself. You were just the means." He walked back to her, taking both her hands in his. "But now I want to do it right. I want to court you proper, like a gentleman. I want to take you to dinner and buy you flowers and ask your permission before I kiss you." Clara felt her heart skip. "You didn't ask permission just now." "I know. That's why I'm asking now." He met her eyes. "Clara Whitmore, may I have permission to court you? To get to know you, really know you, without bullets flying and brothers dying and the whole world trying to kill us?" "That sounds boring." "Safe," she smiled. "I've never had safe before. I think I'd like to try it." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes." Elijah's whole face transformed. For a moment, just a moment, she caught a glimpse of the man he'd been before the fire, before the grief, before the color drained out of his world. A man who smiled easily, laughed freely, loved deeply. "Well then, Miss Whitmore." He offered her his arm in an exaggerated gesture of courtly manners. "May I escort you to the finest dining establishment in the Arizona Territory?" Clara took his arm, playing along. "And where would that be, Mr. Stone?" "About 3 miles east. There's a roadhouse run by a widow named Mrs. Chen. She makes the best dumplings this side of the Mississippi." Tomas introduced me to her cooking years ago. He paused. Also, it's the only dining establishment within 50 miles, so our options are limited. Clara laughed, a real laugh, full of warmth and surprise. Lead the way. They walked back to where Shadow was grazing, their arms linked, their steps finally in sync. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in colors Elijah would never see.
Elijah?
Yeah?
What color is the sky right now?
He looked up, his face thoughtful. Gray. Darker gray at the edges, lighter in the middle.
It's pink, Clara said softly. Pink and orange and gold. All swirled together like someone stirred paint in a pot.
The clouds are purple at the edges, and there's a line of green right at the horizon. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. I used to know what those colors looked like, he finally said. I remember the words, but the images are fading. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really saw them at all, or if I just imagined it. Then I'll be your colors. Clara turned to face him. Every sunrise, every sunset, every flower and bird and rainbow. I'll describe them all, so you never have to forget. Something broke in his expression. Something that had been holding him together for 4 years finally crumbled. And what was left was raw and vulnerable and heartbreakingly human. Why? He asked. Why would you do that for me? Because you saw me when no one else did. Clara reached up and touched his face. You looked at a blind girl in a dusty saloon, and you saw the woman hiding underneath. You gave me back my sight, Elijah. The least I can do is share mine with you. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, she smiled against his chest. But you're stuck with me now. They held each other as the sunset faded and the stars began to appear. Clara counted the colors as they changed, the last pink giving way to purple, the purple deepening the indigo surrendering to black. It's dark now, she said quietly. Everything is shades of gray. Elijah pulled back and looked at her. In the starlight, his face was all shadows and silver. Good, he said. That means we're finally seeing the same thing. He helped her onto Shadow, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and she leaned back into his warmth. Mrs. Chen's place? He asked. Mrs. Chen's place, she agreed. They rode into the darkness together, two broken people, beginning to piece each other back together. The road ahead was long and uncertain, full of obstacles neither of them could predict. But for the first time and longer than either could remember, they weren't afraid of what came next. They had found something worth fighting for. Each other. Mrs. Chen's roadhouse smelled of ginger and wood smoke. Clara sat across from Elijah at a corner table, watching him struggle with chopsticks, while Tomas laughed so hard he nearly fell off his chair. You've been eating here for 3 years, Tomas gasped. How are you still this bad? The sticks are too small. Elijah glared at the wooden utensils like they'd personally offended him. Give me a fork. No forks. Mrs. Chen appeared beside their table, a tiny woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She set down another plate of dumplings and smacked Elijah's hand when he reached for them with his fingers. You learn proper way or you starve. Clara picked up her own chopsticks and lifted a dumpling with practiced ease. Both men stared at her. What? She took a bite. My mother's journal had recipes from everywhere. I taught myself. Of course you did, Elijah shook his head. Is there anything you can't do? I can't seem to get you to stop feeling sorry for yourself. Clara's voice was light, but her eyes were serious. You've been moping for 3 days, Elijah. Ever since we left the homestead. I ain't moping. You barely talk. You don't sleep. You stare at the walls like they've got answers written on them. She set down her chopsticks. What's going on in that head of yours? Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Tomas, sensing the shift in mood, suddenly became very interested in his noodles. "I keep thinking about what comes next," Elijah finally said. "We've got the land, we've got the deed. The silver is sitting there waiting to be dug up. But every time I think about going back, about building something new on top of what I lost, you feel guilty." He looked at her sharply. "How did you know?" "Because I felt the same way when I first took off those dark glasses." Clara reached across the table and took his hand. "I spent 5 years hiding. 5 years pretending to be someone I wasn't. And when you forced me to stop, I felt like I was betraying the girl I'd been. Like opening my eyes meant admitting she never existed. What changed? I realized she did exist, and she mattered. But she wasn't the whole story." Clara squeezed his hand. "Sarah and Emma existed. They mattered. What Barrett did to them was a tragedy that should never be forgotten. But their story ended 4 years ago. Yours is still being written." Elijah stared at their joined hands. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "What if I don't know how to write a new story? Then we'll figure it out together, 1 page at a time." Mrs. Chen reappeared, this time with a bottle of rice wine and 3 cups. She poured without being asked and set the bottle in the center of the table.
"You two talk too much," she announced. "Drink. Eat. Tomorrow, worry about tomorrow. Tonight, you are alive. That is enough."
Tomas raised his cup. "To being alive." "To being alive," Clara echoed. Elijah hesitated, then lifted his own cup. "To being alive." They drank. The wine was warm going down, spreading heat through Clara's chest. She felt something loosen inside her, a knot of tension she hadn't even known she was carrying. "Tomas," she said suddenly, "tell me about Sarah. What was she like?" Both men went still. Elijah's face closed off, but Clara held his gaze. "Please," she said softly, "I want to know her. Not as a ghost you're mourning, but as a person you loved." The silence stretched. Then Tomas cleared his throat. "Sarah was... she was something else." A smile tugged at his lips. "First time I met her, she threw a frying pan at my head." Clara blinked. "What?" "I came riding up to the homestead looking for work. Eli wasn't home. Sarah thought I was a bandit." Tomas chuckled. "She had terrible aim, but she made up for it with enthusiasm. Chased me around the yard with a broom until Eli came home and explained I was a friend." "She didn't trust strangers," Elijah said quietly. Something had shifted in his expression. The closed-off look was softening into something like memory. "Grew up on the frontier. Learned early that most people only wanted to take." "But she trusted you," Clara said. "Took her 2 years to agree to marry me. 2 years of me showing up every Sunday with wildflowers and getting the door slammed in my face." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "She said she needed to make sure I wasn't going to give up at the first sign of trouble." "And Emma?" The smile faded, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. "Emma was the best parts of both of us. She had Sarah's stubbornness and well, Sarah said she had my tendency to pick fights with anyone who looked at her wrong." "She sounds wonderful." "She was." Elijah's voice cracked. "She was 6 years old, and she was already braver than most grown men. When the fire started, she didn't run and hide. She tried to reach her mother. She died, trying to save someone she loved." Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry you lost them." "So am I." Elijah looked up at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw him completely unguarded. No walls, no armor. Just a man carrying a weight that had nearly crushed him. "But you know what I've been thinking about these last few days? It ain't the fire. It ain't Barrett. It ain't even the night they died." He reached out and touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I've been thinking about you." Clara's heart stuttered. "Me?" "That first night, when you were cleaning my wound in the canyon. You asked why I bought you. I said I needed eyes, and that was true, but it wasn't the whole truth."
Then what was? Elijah took a deep breath.
"When I walked into that saloon, I wasn't looking for a partner. I was looking for a reason to keep going. The hunt for Barrett was almost over. I could feel it ending, and I knew that once it was done, once he was dead, there'd be nothing left. No purpose, no future. Just an empty stretch of years until my body caught up with my soul." "Elijah." "But then I saw you." His voice dropped low. "Sitting in that corner, pretending not to see, pretending not to hear. And I recognized something. I recognized the look of someone who'd given up everything to survive. Someone who'd hollowed themselves out so completely they'd forgotten what it felt like to be whole." He leaned closer. "I bought you because I saw myself in you. And I thought maybe, if I could save you, it would mean I wasn't too far gone to be saved myself." Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at this man who had seen through all her walls without even trying. "Did it work?" she whispered. "You tell me." His eyes searched her face. "Am I too far gone?" "No." The word came out fierce, certain. "No, Elijah Stone, you're not too far gone. You're right here. You're alive. And you're going to stay that way, because I am not done with you yet." "Is that a threat or a promise?" "Both." He kissed her. Right there in Mrs. Chen's roadhouse, in front of Tomas and the other diners, and anyone else who cared to watch. Clara melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they broke apart, Tomas was applauding slowly. "Finally," he said. "I was starting to think you two would dance around each other forever." "Shut up, Tomas," Elijah said, but there was no heat in it. He was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since Clara had known him. "What happens now?" Clara asked.
Now, Elijah stood up and offered her his hand.
"Now we go home." The ride back to the homestead took most of the night. They traveled in comfortable silence, Clara pressed against Elijah's back, watching the stars wheel overhead.
"Elijah,
"Yeah?"
the silver under your land. What are you going to do with it?"
He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about that. Barrett wanted it so badly he killed for it, destroyed everything trying to get it. I used to swear I'd never touch it, that the silver was cursed.
And now?
Now I think maybe the curse was never in the silver. It was in the wanting, in the greed." He shifted in the saddle. "The sheriff said there are people who want to thank me for taking down Barrett. Powerful people. They could help me do something with that silver. Something good."
Like what?
"There's a lot of families out here who lost everything to men like Barrett. Ranchers who got pushed off their land. Widows whose husbands disappeared when they wouldn't sell. Children growing up in poverty because someone with money and power decided they didn't matter." His voice hardened with purpose. "What if I used this silver to help them? Built a school, a hospital, something that would actually make a difference?" Clara felt her heart swell.
Sarah would have loved that.
"Yeah." His voice softened. "She would have." They crested a ridge, and the homestead came into view below. In the moonlight, the ruins looked almost peaceful, just shapes against the darkness, the past reduced to shadows. "We're going to build something beautiful here," Clara said quietly. "I can feel it." "We?" "Did you think I was going anywhere?" Elijah pulled Shadow to a stop and turned to look at her. His face was silver in the moonlight, his eyes deep and searching. "Clara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly."
Okay.
When I bought you in that saloon, you didn't have a choice. You came with me because the alternative was worse. And ever since then, we've been running, fighting, surviving. There hasn't been a moment where you could have walked away even if you wanted to. Elijah, let me finish. He took her hands. We're not running anymore. Barrett's dead. The land is mine. You're free, Clara. Really free, for maybe the first time in your life. So I need to know, if I gave you a horse and supplies and sent you anywhere in the world you wanted to go, would you stay? Clara looked at him, at this scarred, broken, beautiful man who had dragged her out of darkness and into something that felt terrifyingly like hope. You're asking if I love you. I'm asking if you want to be here, with me, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you choose it. Clara didn't answer with words. She cupped his face in her hands and kissed him, slow and deep and full of everything she couldn't say. When she pulled back, she was crying.
I choose you, she whispered. I choose this place. I choose whatever life we build together, even if it's hard, even if it hurts, even if the world tries to burn it down around us. I choose all of it, because for the first time in my life, someone is asking me what I want. And what I want is you.
Elijah made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I love you, Clara Jane Whitmore.
I love you too, Elijah Stone.
They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped around each other under the infinite sky. Then Elijah pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Well, he said, his voice rough, I guess we better start building that house. The next 6 months were the hardest and best of Clara's life. They built the house with their own hands, Clara, Elijah, and Tomas, working from dawn to dusk. The frame went up first, then the walls, then the roof. They salvaged what they could from the old foundation and bought the rest with the first trickle of silver money. Clara discovered she had a talent for building. Her mother's journal had included drawings, diagrams, notes on everything from carpentry to masonry. She studied them at night by candlelight and applied them during the day. Elijah joked that she was the only woman in the territory who could hang a door and deliver a foal in the same afternoon. There's a lot you can learn when people think you're not paying attention, she told him. The house grew. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor with windows facing east so they could watch the sunrise. Clara described every color as it happened. The gold of dawn, the blue of midday, the purple and pink of evening. Elijah listened with his eyes closed, building pictures in his mind from her words. I can almost see it, he told her one morning. When you describe it, the colors are faded, like a painting left too long in the sun.
But they're there. Then I'll keep describing, Clara said, every day, until you remember what they look like.
The school opened in spring. They built it on the edge of town, a simple wooden structure with desks Elijah carved himself and the bell that Clara found in the ruins of an old mission. Children came from miles around, the sons and daughters of ranchers, miners, homesteaders. Clara taught them to read. Elijah taught them to work with their hands. Tomas taught them Spanish and how to rope a calf. You're good at this, Elijah said one evening, watching Clara help a young girl with her letters. Teaching. My mother wanted to be a teacher, before she got sick. Clara smiled at the girl, who beamed back before running off to join her friends. She wrote about it in her journal. All these plans she had, all these dreams. You're living them for her. Maybe. Clara took his hand. Or maybe I'm just living. Finally. Summer brought changes. The silver money flowed more freely now, and with it came opportunities. A hospital in town. A church. A mercantile that sold goods at fair prices instead of the gouging rates Barrett's stores had charged. And something else. Something Clara didn't tell Elijah about until she was sure.
I'm pregnant.
The words hung in the air between them. Elijah stared at her, his face unreadable.
Say something,
Clara whispered. He swallowed hard. I'm going to be a father. Again.
Yes.
Clara, He turned away, running his hands through his hair. I failed them. Sarah. Emma. I wasn't there when they needed me most. What if...
Stop.
Clara grabbed his arm and turned him back to face her.
Stop right there. What happened to Sarah and Emma was not your fault. Barrett made a choice. His men made a choice. You didn't fail anyone.
But if I had been there,
You would have died too. And then where would we be?
Clara took his face in her hands.
You survived so this could happen, so we could happen. Don't you see? This baby, our baby, is the future you thought was gone forever.
Elijah's eyes filled with tears. He sank to his knees, pressing his forehead against her stomach. I'm scared, he admitted. I'm so scared of losing you both.
Then don't lose us.
Clara ran her fingers through his hair.
Stay. Fight. Build. Love us so hard that nothing can tear us apart.
I don't know if I'm strong enough.
Then I'll be strong for both of us. The way you were strong for me when I had nothing left.
He looked up at her, this woman who had seen him at his worst and loved him anyway. This woman who had been sold like property and emerged like a queen. This woman who had given him back something he thought was dead forever. Clara Stone, he said. She blinked.
What?
Marry me. He stood up, taking both her hands. I know I did everything backward. I bought you before I courted you. I kissed you before I asked. I got you pregnant before I proposed. But I'm asking now, and I'm asking proper. Clara Jane Whitmore, will you marry me? Clara laughed through her tears.
You really are the worst at doing things in the right order.
Is that a yes?
Of course it's a yes, you impossible man.
He swept her into his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he was crying too. I love you, he said.
I know.
I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving I deserve you.
You already have.
They were married in September, in the parlor of the house they built together. Tomas stood as best man. Mrs. Chen provided the food. The children from the school threw wildflowers as they walked out the door. Clara wore a dress the color of sunrise, peach and gold and soft rose pink. She'd had it made special, knowing Elijah couldn't see the colors, but wanting to describe them to him anyway. What color is it? He asked as she walked toward him.
All of them, she whispered. Every color of every morning I've ever described to you. I wanted to wear the sunrise.
Elijah's face crumpled with emotion. He took her hands, and they spoke their vows in voices that shook with joy and grief and hope, all tangled together. That night, they stood on the porch of their home and watched the stars come out. Clara leaned against Elijah's chest, his arms wrapped around her swelling belly. What do you see? He asked.
Darkness, she said softly. But not empty darkness. Full darkness. Darkness filled with tiny lights, millions of them, stretching on forever.
Tell me about the brightest one. Clara found it, a point of brilliant white low on the horizon.
It's there, just above the mountains, brighter than all the others, like it's trying to outshine the entire sky.
That's the North Star. Sailors use it to find their way home. Elijah's arms tightened around her.
Sarah used to say that when someone dies, Their soul becomes a star.
so they can always guide the people they left behind. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks.
You think she's up there? Sarah and Emma?
I know they are. His voice was thick but steady. And I think they're happy. I think they're looking down at us right now, and they're glad I found you.
You didn't find me. You bought me.
Same thing. Clara laughed, a wet sound that was half sob.
Elijah Stone, that is the worst romantic thing anyone has ever said to me.
I'll work on it.
Please do.
They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the house, a fire crackled in the hearth. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Clara?
Yes?
Thank you.
For what?
For seeing me. He pressed a kiss to her hair. For really seeing me, when I was too blind to see myself. Clara turned in his arms, looking up at his face.
In the starlight, he was all shadows and silver. This man who had saved her, challenged her, loved her, married her. This man who would be the father of her child.
Thank you for the same, she said.
Elijah smiled. It was a real smile, full and warm and free of shadows. The smile of a man who had finally come home. What color is tomorrow going to be? He asked. Clara thought about it. She thought about the baby growing inside her, the house standing strong behind them, the future stretching out like an unwritten page. Every color, she said, every single one. And it was. The baby was born in February, a girl with her father's dark eyes and her mother's auburn hair. They named her Emma Rose, after the daughter Elijah had lost, and the flower that bloomed even in the harshest winters. Clara held her in the morning light, watching the sunrise paint colors across the nursery walls. Tell me what you see, Elijah said from the doorway. Clara smiled. I see everything. I see the past and the future and every moment in between. I see a family that was broken and a family that was built. I see a man who thought he had nothing left and a woman who thought she was nothing at all. And what do you see now? Clara looked up at him. This man who had bought her, saved her, loved her, married her. This man who saw the world in shades of gray, but felt it in every color of the rainbow. I see home, she said. I finally see home. Elijah crossed the room and knelt beside her. He touched his daughter's face with trembling fingers, tears streaming down his cheeks. Welcome to the world, Emma Rose Stone, he whispered. You're going to change everything. And she did, because that's what love does. It takes broken pieces and builds something new. It takes darkness and fills it with light. It takes two people who thought they had lost everything and shows them that the best is yet to come. Clara Jane Stone, the woman who was sold for $80 and became worth more than all the silver in the Arizona territory. Elijah Stone, the man who saw the world in shades of gray and learned to feel every color through the woman who loved him. And Emma Rose, the daughter who carried both their stories forward into a future brighter than either of them had dared to dream. The girl who pretended to be blind found a man who couldn't see colors, and together they painted a life more beautiful than anything either had imagined. Some people say love is about finding someone who completes you, but Clara knew the truth. Love is about finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and chooses to stay anyway. She had spent 23 years being invisible. Now she would spend the rest of her life being seen. And that, in the end, was worth more than all the gold in the world.